Let's bring a question in from one of the religious leaders joining us tonight, Dr. Joel Hunter, who is senior pastor of the 12,000-member Northland Church in Longwood, Florida. Dr. Hunter.
How are you, Dr. Hunter?
I'm doing fine, Senator. Thank you. Senator, many of the issues we're going to be talking about tonight, Darfur, AIDS, abortion, torture, could present you with choices that will have life and death consequences for countless people around the world. What are the first principles you fall back on to make such decisions? Are there certain activities or references or people with whom you consult in order to do what is morally right?
You know, Dr. Hunter, I think this is one of the challenges that face any of us who are in public life, where literally you do have the authority to make these decisions that could very well be life and death decisions. And they are daunting. And I do not pretend to know how I will deal with every single one of them. But I do have a sense of the process by which I will try to approach them. And it really is rooted in you know, my prayer, my contemplation, my study. I think you have to immerse yourself in advice, information, criticism from others. I don't pretend to even believe that I know the answers to a lot of these questions. I don't. But I do believe that you have to be willing to expose yourself to many different points of view, and then you have to make that decision. I think that for a lot of us, decisions are ones that you don't just make and put on a shelf. To be fair, to be constantly struggling and challenging yourself, you have to keep opening up that decision and asking. And very often, as you know, some decisions look like they're 100 to nothing until you actually examine them. And some decisions truly are right down the middle, and you're not sure which side of the line you will decide upon. You mentioned some of the very difficult decisions that we are going to face, and there are countless more. You know, how do we get out of Iraq the right way? Everyone knows there is no easy, comfortable decision. I believe we've got to begin taking our troops out of Iraq based on my analysis of what I think is the best path forward for us and for the Iraqis. But I am deeply aware that there will be predictable and unpredictable consequences. And part of making a decision is having to live with the consequences. And I have been very fortunate in my life to have people whom I feel very comfortable talking to openly, with total frankness, seeking their guidance. They don't all agree with me. They don't all share my view when I start the conversation, perhaps. But I don't think you can surround yourself only with people with whom you think you will agree. And for me, being amongst people who challenge me, who make me uncomfortable, to be very blunt, is an important part of my decision-making process. I want to push back. I want to argue. I want to raise other hypotheticals and throw them back to see what the outcome is. But at the end of the day, since we are running to be the President of the United States, you have to be comfortable making a decision, because you cannot say, well, let's put it on the back burner and then get back to it sometime when it's clearer for many of these decisions. And then you have to live with the consequences. But I hope I will never, ever find myself being defensive or abrupt and dismissive of people who disagree with me. I regret that that often happens in politics. And maybe it's because oftentimes the decision-making process is so exhausting. You know, if you're a person of faith, after you've prayed, if you're a person willing to subject yourself to criticism after you've done it, you're just so relieved to make the decision you don't want to revisit it. But I don't think that a president can afford to do that.
Senator, do you believe personally that life begins at conception?
I believe that the potential for life begins at conception. I am a Methodist, as you know. My church has struggled with this issue. In fact, you can look at the Methodist Book of Discipline and see the contradiction and the challenge of trying to sort that very profound question out. But for me, it is also not only about a potential life, it is about the other lives involved. And therefore, I have concluded, after great concern and searching my own mind and heart over many years, that our task should be in this pluralistic, diverse life of ours in this nation, that individuals must be entrusted to make this profound decision, because the alternative would be such an intrusion of government authority that it would be very difficult to sustain in our kind of open society. And as some of you have heard me discuss before, I think abortion should remain legal, but it needs to be safe and rare. And I have spent many years now as a private citizen, as First Lady, and now as Senator, trying to make it rare, trying to create the conditions where women had other choices. I have supported adoption, foster care. I helped to create the campaign against teenage pregnancy, which fulfilled our original goal 10 years ago of reducing teenage pregnancies by about a third. And I think we have to do even more, and I am committed to doing that. And I guess I would just add, from my own personal experience, I have been in countries that have taken very different views about this profoundly challenging question. Some of you know I went to China in 1995 and spoke out against the Chinese government's one-child policy, which led to forced abortions and forced sterilizations, because I believed that we needed to bear witness against what was an intrusive, abusive, dehumanizing effort to dictate how women and men would proceed with respect to the children they wished to have. And then shortly after that, I was in Romania. And there I met women who had been subjected to the communist regime of the 1970s and 80s, where they were essentially forced to bear as many children as possible for the good of the state, and where abortion was criminalized and women were literally forced to have physical exams and followed by the secret police. And so many children were abandoned and left to the orphanages that unfortunately led to an epidemic. So when I think about this issue, I think about the whole range of concerns and challenges associated with it. I continue to do what I can to reduce the number and to improve and increase the care for women, and particularly the adoption system and the other opportunities that women would have to make different choices.
Senator, I want to go to the other end of the spectrum and the end of life and ask you, do you believe that it is compassionate, that it is appropriate to let someone who is really suffering choose to end their life?
Again, this is one of those incredibly challenging issues. You know, the Terry Schiavo case in Florida posed that for many people. And it was one of those decisions, to go back to Dr. Hunter's point, where there were people of good faith and people of strong feelings on both sides about what should happen to that woman's life. And I don't know that any of us is in a position to make that choice for families or for individuals. But I don't want us also to condone government action that would legitimize or encourage end-of-life decisions. Somehow there has to be a framework for us to determine how can people who are either able to make these decisions on their own do so, or if they are not, how best do we create a decision process for their families to try to decide. And you know, we are being faced with a lot of these difficult decisions because of what the world we live in today with modern technology and so much else, and we're going to have to come to grips with them one way or another.